Hi and welcome to the Financial Fox. Today on the show I will be joined by John Woods, CTO of Algorand Foundation. So probably many of you know Bitcoin, Ethereum, there are many layer one. They are striving and they are leading innovation, and Algorand is one of them. I wasn't so familiar with the blockchain myself, so I've been doing lots of research, and I hope here, having this conversation with John, I can share some insights so you can also learn a little bit more about Algorand, their mission, and what they are trying to do. Hi, John. It's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. How are you?
Yes, I'm fine. Listen, I was just telling my viewers and, all our followers that, when you talk about crypto and blockchain, there are these main leaders, right? We know there is Ethereum, now Polygon, Cardano, obviously Bitcoin, Phantom, Avalanche, but Algorand, is a pioneer in the blockchain space. Was founded by Silvio Micali, that is a well-known cryptographer and tough leader, and you are now leading all the kind of like technology side coming from Cardano. So I think this is really a good place to start to kind of like tell us high level what is Cardano, and then we can go a little bit more into details about what is the aim of the blockchain and who is building on it.
Absolutely. I think, I've worked on Ethereum professionally when I worked in Consensus, and I've worked on Cardano professionally, of course, with Charles and the team, and that was great, a great time there. And now I'm working on Algorand. The thing I would say that separates Cardano and Algorand from maybe the rest of the pack is that there's a very strong culture of academia. There's a strong culture of excellence in terms of the engineering, and this leads to some of the brightest minds, both in terms of applied cryptography, actual cryptography, applied mathematics, and indeed distributed systems engineering. So this is where you're building things on computers that are going to be in different locations around the world, but they still have to interact together. And so both of these two projects have some of the brightest minds literally in the world working on these problems. And so I think that that's the difference between, say, an Algorand and a Cardano, which very much has that culture deep in its DNA, versus some of the other ones that you mentioned earlier. And so Algorand is Silvio Micali's vision, and his vision was to try to solve this, blockchain trilemma, as it's called, where you're trying to make sure that you have security, decentralization, and scalability all at the same time in a single product. And it's very difficult to achieve that. When you're building computer systems, and it doesn't matter whether this is something like you're building at home as a hobby, or something you're building professionally, I think it's kind of worth saying to people, just so people understand, when you strive for excellence in a product, it takes forever to build. And this is, why things like the iPhone were being worked on for 10 or 15 years before the public's seen it. And so it takes a very long time to build things. And when you add complexity, so you add lots of features and cool bells and whistles, it tends to mean that the product will suffer from more bugs and problems because there's just more complexity inherently in the system. And then if we move to blockchain, which is, of course, I know some people see it as magic, but really it's another computer another computer application that's running on normal computers that we have out there. It's just another app. This time, of course, it's a bunch of different apps running on different computers around the world that all talk to each other, but ultimately it is just a computer application. When you're building that, now all of a sudden you're trying to make the system decentralized. And that means that it's robust to attacks in a global context. So it can be attacked from all angles, from many, many different people, but we still expect those applications to stay up, to stay running, and to stay executing correctly, so that folks don't lose their money, and and the dApps on the network work correctly, etc. And so the key piece there is this distributed. So decentralized and distributed are kind of quite similar. when we say decentralized, we're really talking about the fact that there's no one single entity that controls the network. And when we say distributed, we're talking about the fact that the network itself is not just running on your computer, but it's running on many computers around the world that are all connected to each other. And so when you add this distributed, decentralized factor to your computer application, again, this adds complexity. It's very tricky to kind of ensure that you have this virtue of decentralization, but also that things run fast and things can scale well to service many, many people. And so I guess this is one of the things that's tried to be solved on Ethereum, on Cardano, indeed on Algorand. And each of these projects takes a different kind of approach to how to solve it. And I think that Algorand has taken a very clever approach. And indeed, by doing that, it's managed to build a network that is both scalable, so works for loads of people at the same time, and we don't have to wait too long for the transactions to go through like we do on Bitcoin. It's secure, and by that I mean we've never had any breaks in security. No one's ever managed to steal anyone's keys or break the system or stop the system. And it's decentralized in the sense that no one can take my coins from me. I can choose to do with them what I wish. I can build on the platform without anyone's permission. And ultimately, the platform is open for everyone in an equal way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But, I still have a question because I think you kind of like nail it when you said about, some blockchain, they focus a little bit more on getting things out and then they have to fix. That's kind of like the Ethereum approach. And then you have got other blockchain where we want to make it right. So we wait. And that's kind of like the Cardano approach because they want to make sure that when they go out, everything is going to be perfect, right? And what I want to understand is what is your recipe? How can you make, something scalable, secure, live as well, and decentralized at the same time?
Yeah, sure. And it's I think it's interesting. So I like to be authentic when I speak in the sense, and what I mean by that is, I don't like to just have too much like hype and bluster. So it's important to note that Algorand is not perfectly decentralized. It's not perfectly secure, and neither are any of these other networks, by the way. And so there's always trade-offs there. Now, we think we've struck a balance where it's the right level of decentralized, the right level of secure, the right level of speed. But of course, these are trade-offs, and so I think it's like if you move one dial, then the other dial moves on its own. And then you move the middle dial, and then that dial starts moving on its own. So you're trying to balance it out, and you can't force everything to be perfect.
I love when you said about trade-offs. So
yeah.
just going at a deeper level, what are the trade-offs that you're making? What are the things that are most important for you than other? That doesn't mean the other are not important, but what are kind of like the priority?
Sure, absolutely. This is very important. And by the way, this to answer your previous question, which was like, how do you do it? How do you kind of balance, because that's the word I think, balance the need to be pragmatically delivering things, because shipped is better than never. You want to get your product to the market while it's still relevant. I call it a product. Of course, it's not a product in the sense.
I know the feeling.
Yeah. So like, you want to get the release out, but of course you want to be careful with people's money, because if there's a catastrophic break, then you're gonna hurt people, and then also you're trying to be competitive, and you're trying to add enough features but not introduce regressions, which is where you see a slowdown or bugs that you're not aware of. And so it's really tricky. And what it comes down to ultimately is working with the senior engineering team, I guess folks like myself who have the experience in trying to do this. And really we're just trying to feel around and make sure that we make wise decisions and reasonable decisions. So it's kind of you play it by ear a little bit, and you just try to figure it out as you go along. There's not like a perfect formula for success, but yeah, to answer your next question, which was, what are the priorities that I champion? What are the things that I personally think are important? And I think there's no point in doing any of this stuff if you betray the original intention of why we're doing this. When you build systems that are decentralized, like Algorand or others, that adds complexity, and it's a pain in the ass. It's a pain in the ass to build. It's much easier to build a traditional computer application, which is a centralized application. And so the reason we're doing this in the first place is because we care about the idea that something is not controlled by a central authority. We care about the idea that your coins or your assets, the coins thing I don't really care about so much, but like, you know, the assets on the platform, the dApps on the platform, the native tokens, we care that these things are self-sovereign, that they're owned by people, that we can't just take them off them. We can't just repossess the coins or the tokens. We care deeply about the fact that the network should be permissionless, that there shouldn't be this authority you have to ask permission to run an app, that you should be able to, myself, yourself, some kid on the other side of the world, should be able to have an idea, code it, and release it on the platform. We care about censorship. We care deeply that we want to make sure that all transactions are equal on the network. And so making sure that we don't censor transactions or that all transactions are treated equally is very important. And so these are the virtues. These are the kind of the top level kind of sort of reasons why we do what we do. Otherwise, you might as well use Apple Pay, which is also great, but doesn't have these things. And so this for me is the most important things. And so when we're building a network, we always have to put that first. Now, there are areas of Algorand that I would like to improve. I'm only with the project, by the way, six or 7 months, so I'm relatively new as CTO. And I can tell you, there's things I would, and I know that they want to improve on Cardano. There's the same on Ethereum. Every project knows the things it needs to improve. I think Algorand is really fast. It's secure and it's decentralized, certainly in consensus and certainly in terms of network interactions. But as I've conceded before, I do think we need to improve the decentralization of relays. Relays are these, so you know, the network is composed of nodes. The nodes talk to each other. The nodes are the computer applications that are running on people's computers around the world. There are two types. There's consensus, and they make the blocks, and they, you know, build the blockchain effectively. And then there's relays, and they're just like highways or motorways for information. They connect all of the various consensus nodes around the world. And so right now, you know, to run a relay is quite complicated. To get it to be part of the public network, you have to register it with the foundation. And so it's not perfectly decentralized. I think we need to improve there. But the most important piece is the foundation is there to make sure that we can move forward with this being decentralized. And so what is the key step to moving away from this this kind of blessed relays into relays that are completely open? And the answer is incentivization. So right now, you don't get paid by the network to run a relay. You do get paid by Bitcoin to mine Bitcoin. You do get paid by Monero to mine Monero. Monero is a great cryptocurrency, by the way. You should check that out. You do get paid on Cardano to mint blocks or to be a block producer. You get paid by the network. So we need to introduce, I think, and we're looking at this because, you know, I don't want to make huge changes without taking, you know, people's opinion into account, talking to the community, talking to the founders, talking to the guys who have been here before me. And so we think that maybe it makes sense to start incentivizing relays. So you would get paid by the Algorand network to host a relay and run a relay on your computer. And when we get to that place, then we can start decentralizing relays even further so that relays will be run by people who we don't even know.
So let me just understand right, because also Cardano is a proof of stake.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the difference with the proof of stake on Algorand? That means that people staking are not going to get paid?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different differences. There's a couple of differences. So on Algorand, consensus, so the production of blocks and the verification of transactions, that's not incentivized. You don't get paid by the network a reward to do that action. And so folks people out there will run these consensus nodes because they're very cheap to run. So you can run them if you wanted on a Raspberry Pi in your house. It doesn't cost very much to run. And the thinking, the game theory thinking, I believe behind it is that people will want to secure the network if they have a stake in the network. That's kind of, you want to secure your money. So that's why people would run the nodes. On Cardano, you do get paid to stake. So you would stake, but the key difference between Cardano and Algorand is, with Cardano, you stake to a pool. So there's stake pools in Cardano, and effectively there's collections of people who've put all their money in one spot. It's secured, of course, by the network, and it's all very well engineered, but they put their money in one big pool, and that big pool is used in the staking process, so it's seen as a collection of money, not just one person's money. On Algorand, we have a variation of proof of stake. It's not called proof of stake, it's called pure proof of stake. And the pure bit is that we have a mechanism using Silvio Micali's VRF cryptographic primitives. That's a technical building block made by our founder Silvio Micali. He went and he wrote a paper. It's mathematical. It's a spec for a cryptographic Lego brick, and he made this little cryptographic Lego brick that we can use to do consensus. But ultimately, it lets us do this pure version of proof of stake, and that means that we can select someone from all of the people out there who are currently engaged in consensus, whether it's on a Raspberry Pi in their bedroom or whether it's on a big chunky computer in Amazon's cloud. And the VRF, this little Lego brick, is like a lottery. You know, it's like you pull the wheel and it spins and it selects one of these guys, but it does so with very important virtues. It does so in a way that you can't predict who's next, because otherwise you could attack that guy. You could like, oh, I know who's going to have it next week. I'll go around to his house with a baseball bat. You don't want that. So you can't predict who's next, but you can verify that who's predicted was correct. So as it's going along, you can look back through the selection and you can like, yep, that's all correct. It's all correct. And so this is a very powerful building block. And so that's the difference. The difference is basically this. Algorand, anyone can stake, and we don't have pools. And the person who's allowed to build a block and verify the block is selected randomly but verifiably. On Cardano instead, they kind of have a schedule of the pools that are going to create blocks ahead of time, and it's not mined, but it's staked within a pool context.
Okay, I think that's quite clear. Now, let's maybe touch about another value, which is at the core of Algorand, and we haven't discussed yet, which is being a blockchain that's sustainable. So this element of sustainability, Algorand championing, as a green blockchain. So how can you do that? What does it mean?
Yeah, sure. I think this is really, really interesting. And I want to say from the outset, I think being green is really important. I think it's important. I didn't think it was important 10 years ago, by the way. I'm nearly 40. When I was in my early or late 20s, I wasn't that bothered about it. But like as you get older and you have kids and you do look at the state of the planet, the state of the place, and you think I want to leave something nicer behind for my 1-year-old or my 4-year-old, right? So you become a bit more self-aware about your consumption and stuff like that. But then I want to just say something. It's that like I think proof of work blockchains get a really hard time sometimes. And I want to just be clear, from a personal point of view, I'm not anti proof of work. And so I don't think proof of stake is the only way. It's one way, it's a cleaner way for sure, but it has trade-offs versus proof of work. So proof of work is an interesting concept, and I don't think we should completely disregard it. But that's just a separate thing. But proof of stake, and certainly Algorand's proof of stake, my God, it is really, really low in terms of power usage. So let me give the viewers a quick kind of summary of electronics and power. So you have voltage and you have current. People will be familiar with this. You plug something in, the volts push the current, and the current powers the device. And so we measure power in a unit called watts. That's why your light bulbs are rated in watts. And so voltage times current equals watts. So now we're in watts and we understand watts. So how many watts does a thing take to use? And so let's say you have a 60-inch TV, big flat screen TV. That's going to run at about 300 watts. And to put it in perspective, your MacBook runs at about 100 watts, so about a third of a TV. And so this is going to start giving us a flavor for where we're at. So and if you use like a Google Home device or a little Amazon Alexa or something, that device will run at about kind of 10 watts. So you got 10 watts for the Alexa, you got 150 watts for the MacBook, and you got about 300 watts for your TV. There are certain devices in your home though that use a lot more power. So if you use a kettle to boil water, that's at about 3,000 watts. And if you use a shower, like a power shower, it's about 9,000 watts, right? So that's kind of puts it in perspective. And so it turns out that the whole of Algorand running at any one time is using about 80,000 watts. Now, that might sound like a lot when I told you a kettle was 3,000, but it really isn't that much. Because if you think about it, Algorand's a global network of billions of transactions that have been processed. That's globally distributed all over the earth. That's executing transactions like up to we've seen last week 50,000 transactions a second in some blocks. And so all of this super secure running at 80,000 watts. To put that in perspective, what in your home would be charging at about 80,000 watts or 80 kilowatts as we call it? The answer is about a Tesla. Your Tesla car will charge at about that. So it's kind of like running Algorand is kind of like constantly charging a single Tesla. And so in the grand scheme of power versus what it's bringing, this is basically nothing, right? Because there's Teslas all over the world that are being charged.
Yeah, exactly. And considering that you can still you can still be very fast.
Absolutely. And so if you compare that to other networks that are proof of stake, I mean, Algorand is, 2 or 3 times more power efficient than some of the other networks that are out there that are also proof of stake. But it's an order of magnitude, so a 10x, 100x more power efficient than some of the proof of work networks that are there. And so, really, if you can, and by the way, I should add, this is an important piece. If Algorand had twice the number of transactions in the morning, or 3 times or 4 times, it could cope with that, no problem, and it wouldn't increase the power. So the power usage is kind of flat. It doesn't. I mean, it might scale up a teeny tiny bit, but it doesn't go like this. So that means we could be in 5 years in the future, Algorand could be processing billions of dollars a day in terms of financial value, running at this kind of charging Tesla rate.
Right. So it's basically going to be stable even without, depending on the network congestion
Exactly.
or usability. It doesn't have to be congestion. So do transactions get congested?
Sure. So, I mean, theoretically, yes, it is possible for transactions to get congested. We don't see that on Algorand at the moment because the network is capable. I mean, the official number is around 7,000 transactions a second. That's the official, what we say is supported. But last week, I think our engineers are quite conservative, as engineers tend to be, because last week we had a block with 50,000 transactions, and it had normal settlement time, normal block. The block traveled across the internet at the normal speed. There was no problems, no skips, no bumps. So right now, no, we're not seeing congestion because we can do, let's say, a comfy 20,000 transactions a second based on what I've seen last week, and we're seeing about 20 transactions a second. So we're way below where we can be. So we don't see any congestion now, but theoretically, if some entity or multiple entities in the morning started producing huge amounts of transactions in excess of, say, 10, 15, 20,000 transactions a second, we would start seeing some congestion. And then fees would start to ramp up slowly to ease that off.
Okay, so let's tell a little bit about who is building on Algorand, because you mentioned about financial transactions. So obviously, maybe DeFi is a big thing building on Algorand, but where do you see the main use case?
Sure, it's a good question. I think obviously like right now we see a lot of folks who are interested in NFTs and what they could represent in terms of art and stuff like that. We also see the classic stuff that you'll see across the rest of the financial platforms like Ethereum, where we have dexes, bridges, oracles, swaps, the usual stuff that you'd expect. I think gaming is going to potentially be a big one over the next kind of coming couple of years. And let me explain why. We're working to integrate deeply with the big gaming engines, the Unreals and Unities of this world. So when you're building, your viewers may or may not be aware, but when you're building a video game, there are 2 major engines that you would use. They call them engines, like platforms that you use to build your game. You don't just start, normally you don't just start on your own. And so these engines are pretty much used to build 80% of the big games in the world. And so we're working to integrate with these engines so that Algorand can be used to issue NFTs in the game that represent the assets in the game. So I don't know if you play games yourself, but let's say you're playing a video game and you win an achievement, or you have a new a new gun with a new color or whatever. So these kind of things at the moment, they're just built into the game and they're centralized. Wouldn't it be cooler if we could win these things in the game and then maybe move them to a second market where we could sell them again, or trade them with our friends in a decentralized way? And so this emancipation of assets, achievements, and game licenses from the networks like Steam and Xbox and PlayStation Network to get lifted out of there and have it be a self-sovereign thing that folks can interact with directly, and have freedom over their assets. This is going to be, I think, a huge use case. So you've got the traditional financial ones, but you've also got, I think, gaming as a major one. And one other thing I would say, there's of course use cases that I haven't even considered and don't even have a thought on yet, but But another one that I think is going to be interesting is NFTs and other use cases. So I see NFTs currently used a lot for art, but of course one has to remember that they're basically a mechanism for digital rights management. And so this transcends away from just simply art. One can use NFTs to issue the right to enter a hotel room or the right to drive a car. And so as an example, I don't actually have one, but if I had a Tesla, and I have the Tesla app, I can open my car. Wouldn't it be cool if I could send my car key from my app on my phone to my mom or to my dad or to my brother or to my friend? And to do so in a way that the key leaves my phone and goes to their phone. So that like there's really only one key, but I'm able to move it around. And so this type of use case where you could maybe, for example, in a decentralized, trustless way, move assets like car keys, access, VIP club stuff, access to nightclubs, etc., to move that stuff around. I think that's cool. And you might say, well, why bother doing it on a blockchain when you can just have the club do that, or Tesla can manage it themselves in their own back end, or Hilton Hotel can do it themselves. But the answer really is because it's robust, it's secure, it's up all the time, and indeed these networks provide a layer of trust and security that is just not achievable in a centralized backend. So you can watch your key. You can know that the key is where you said it would be, rather than trusting the Hilton Hotel or indeed Tesla to do that for you.
Yeah, I think this is a brilliant use case that you just mentioned. There are many other, like insurance as well, is something that the blockchain space is looking at. But I think with Algorand, you are making some interesting steps. Like you mentioned sports, I want to mention FIFA here, and then you have done a deal in Italy as well, where I'm Italian by origin, so it's nice to see actually getting some traction from traditional institution as well, and partnering with them to kind of move the business and economy to the next level. Do you want to share maybe anything about, the recent deals, agreement that you have been rolling out in the last few months?
Sure. So I think a lot of that is being built by Silvio and the team at the Inc. It's not something I've been directly involved with, but what I would say is that I think it shows one thing. Companies like FIFA, governments like the Italian government or the Italian central bank. Is it like Banco Italia? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So these tiers of institutions and firms, they don't pick crap. They don't go with nonsense. They do their due diligence. I worked in central banking myself. I worked for 2 years with the Irish Central Bank. I worked at the European Central Bank briefly, and so I know the level of rigor that these organizations ensure goes into their technical decisions. And so I think if I had any comment, I would say, although I wasn't directly involved with these deals from the foundation side, because I'm sure they've been underway for some time, they're a testament to the technical excellence of the platform. It's showing confidence from obviously a very savvy organization in choosing Algorand, because they obviously see something there in terms of, I guess, the maturity of the platform and the technical quality of the platform.
Yeah, and also the people behind it. I think there is always, this element of trust. As you said, Bank of Italy is not just gonna partner with anybody just for
Exactly.
the hype to be, in Web3. Anyway, the final question, which I think is quite an important one, is about interoperability, because I know all these great things that you are building on Algorand. That's fantastic. But if we look at the future, most of people in our industry see is going to be multi-chain, and it's going to be interoperable, different chain for different purposes. So tell me your views and how Algorand approach to this multi-chain future and also interoperability.
Absolutely. So I agree with that broadly, by the way. We don't have one operating system. By the way, I should say, I see these chains somewhat like operating systems, like Windows or Mac OS. These are platforms on which we build things. They're decentralized platforms rather than running simply on your computer locally, but they're still platforms. And so just like we have a number of different operating systems, and some are more suitable for highly secure kind of things, some are very lightweight and they run on your toaster, some are much easier to use like Microsoft Windows and are good for games. Just like we have those different flavors of operating systems, I think we're going to have different flavors of blockchains that excel in various areas. And so I do broadly agree that the future is multi-chain. I think that the cat is out of the bag on that one. I think it's quite clear. In terms of interoperability, it's absolutely essential. I always find it quite funny because, you know, computers are connected to the internet by definition. Well, these days they are anyway. And I've said at the start of the interview, you know, blockchains are just another app, and they're running on these computers that are connected to the internet. So I think it's ironic, really, that we have to build these special bridges between them when they're running on things that are connected to the internet. One would expect that they could just communicate, but of course, the reason why these apps can't just talk to each other is the same reason why, you know, the Microsoft Word doesn't just talk to Safari browser, because they're just not speaking the same language and they haven't got a layer of communication. And so what we have to do, if we want these blockchains to be able to communicate with each other and not be islands of value on their own, because that's what they are, they're kind of these social networks of value, but they're on their own little islands. We have to build bridges between them. And of course, we have the technology to do that. We know how to do it. The hard part about bridging value and bridging information between blockchains really lies not in dispatching the information from one blockchain or accepting the information on the other blockchain. It really lies in the middle, where we're trying to validate that information during transit. And so if one blockchain says, hey, this happened, and the other blockchain's like, okay, cool, got that, we need to, they can't validate it on the blockchain side because they don't have the information. So what we have to do is, during transit, in the bridge, we have to validate that the information is good before it gets to the recipient blockchain. And we have to provide that proof to the recipient blockchain. And so the way that tends to be done at the moment is using guardian networks, or basically additional nodes that will check the message on one side, validate it, and provide the proof. But of course, what's the problem with that? The problem is, one, you've now got a whole bunch of other people you have to trust in the middle, and two, you have to basically verify and execute this computational effort. So you've got all these computers that are running, extra computers that are running to do this work. And so we wanted to eliminate that. And so we think we've done a very good job at providing what could be a foundational standard in how interoperability is executed. And so in the last couple of months, we released state proofs. And these are, as I've mentioned before, a technology which allows Algorand to issue proof of transaction and proof of state from the Algorand blockchain to other blockchains, cryptographically verified. So mathematically, you can verify it by running some equations. You can say, yep, this is good. And doing so in a way that's secure against even quantum factoring attacks. And so this is a radically advanced piece of technology. And so the best bit about this is that these state proofs are created by the Algorand network, running at that 80 kilowatts, right? So still at the Tesla charger level, we're producing this mathematical proof. So we no longer need the guy in the middle. We no longer need the network in the middle. Now we have the ability to communicate from Algorand to another blockchain in a way that's completely mathematically verifiable and secure, without having anyone in the middle. And so this is super powerful. Yeah.
So you are basically saying you don't need any bridge. You are not using any bridge.
So you would still have a bridge, but the bridge wouldn't have the middle bit. It would just have the beginning and the end. So you wouldn't have the validation layer in the middle. You would have, it's kind of, this is where the bridge analogy breaks down. Normally you have the creator, the receiver, and then the validators. Now we just have the creator and the receiver. There's no validation piece.
Okay, so basically the role of bridging is going to change quite a lot.
I think so. I think the way wormhole bridges now, the way some of those bridges work right now, which is where you have this validation network, I think that will evaporate. And you know, Algorand's not the only one working on this. Like Cardano, the guys at IOHK are working as well on trustless bridging, and I think that they're quite close there too. What I would say is, though, that I would love to see, rather than a whole bunch of competing standards, I'd love to see one standard. I mean, for example, with Wi-Fi, we have one Wi-Fi standard. We don't have 10 different standards. Everyone's Wi-Fi works the same way, and that's great. So I don't want to have a situation occur where there's 15 different ways to build trustless bridges. I would like to center on one, whether it's the one from IOHK, the one from Algorand, or one that I'm not aware of yet. But I think we need to, as a community, get around a standard on this.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned the word standard, because that's what we need when we are talking about interoperability. But I think we got a flavor of what you're working on, and we can do another interview maybe when we discuss a little bit more in details how this interoperability with a new standard is unfolding. John, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think it was a great interview, and I learned a lot about Algorand. I hope our viewers did as well. And where people can find you on the internet, if they've got any question on how they can join the Algorand protocol.
Absolutely. So I'm on the Algorand Discord, okay? And if you just type Algorand Discord into Google, it's the first link. You'll jump on there. And we have our DevRel guys there, can answer technical questions. I'll be there, etc. And also on Twitter, there's at Algorand Foundation, at Algorand, and indeed myself, at John Allen Woods, and that's JOHN ALAN and then WOODS.
Fantastic. John, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely, my pleasure. See you soon.